former Liberal Minister Bains. Former Liberal Minister Bains, as a Minister of the Crown, you're responsible to Parliament for all parliamentary appropriations under your department, are you not, in addition to appointments?
When all ministers set budgets, they need to be approved by Parliament. That is correct.
Right, you're accountable for that. So you're accountable for every dollar that's spent that that was allocated. I'm going to ask you, first of all, about your appointment of the chair, Annette Verschuren, who at this committee said 3 times that she didn't apply, that you phoned her twice to ask her to serve. And then,
point of order, Mr. Chair.
She applied after that.
Sorry,
It's
Mr.
not a
Perkins.
point of debate, Mr.
Hold on. I do have a point of order. I do have to hear
Okay, we'll start all over again then.
the point of order. Yes, Mr. Duane.
The particular person he's talking
That's
about has
debate.
corrected the record,
she
in
hasn't.
writing. Thank you so much.
No, she hasn't.
Well,
No, she hasn't.
okay.
Interrupted me before I even got my question
Mr.
in.
Perkins,
I would
I
argue
said
that
I'm
it's
backing
from
up the
top.
clock. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Bains, you phoned, according to Annette Verschuren, you phoned her twice to ask her to serve. Is that correct? Because that's what she said at the committee.
As I have stated in my previous
I don't want a
testimony
dissertation on the
Hindu,
appointment process. It's a simple yes or no. You phoned her twice, yes or no?
as I stated in my previous testimony at industry committee, I reached out to a number of people during my tenure as a minister and asked them to participate in
her-
this
Point of
open,
order.
You called her
transparent,
twice.
Point of
merit-based.
order, Mr. Chair.
Perkins, I have a point of order. I've stopped the clock. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. I believe that Ms. Verschuren, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce her name, did
Again, this is
correct her
this.
testimony.
Okay, I just
Point
ruled
of
on this.
order.
This is not a
It
point
doesn't
of
make
order.
sense.
We will
Stop.
start
It
from the
does not
Stop.
make sense.
Okay.
It does not make
All right.
sense for
This
us
is
to
a-
continue
start
I
from the top.
to
endeavored
harass
at
a witness
Miss
on this.
Miss
The
Miss
evidence is
Khaild.
there, so I'm just not sure why. It just,
She applied after the
Does
All
phone
right,
not
call.
make
Mr.
sense
Perkins,
at all.
Mr. Perkins,
And you'll
Let's
learn
not go
something
down that
for a
road.
change.
Mr.
Why don't
Perkins.
you want to learn anything?
Mr. Perkins,
Or is it
I
just
will.
part of the cover-up coalition?
Mr. Perkins, I remind
I take
before
personal
before I
exception
remind
to
You
what
should.
Mr.
I take
Perkins just
exception to
said,
your cover-up.
Chair.
we are going to suspend for a
Absolutely.
minute. The floor is yours, please, Mr. Perkins. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Bains, when I ask a yes or no question, I appreciate a yes or no, not a rag the puck. Yes or no, you called Annette Verschuren 2 times as she testified here in committee.
As I had mentioned in my previous testimony, I was responsible for over 100
List of
governor
appointments.
council
Please
recommendations.
answer the question, or I'm
And
going to
so
interrupt
I don't
you
recall
constantly.
specific
Answer the
conver-
question. Did you phone her twice? That was her testimony. Is she telling the truth?
As I said, I don't recall
Okay.
any
So-
such conversation
so she-
taking place.
She testified here that 3 times that she was asked by you. Who told you to ask her?
As I've said, in 2016, a new appointments process was introduced. It was open to all Canadians, and it's not uncommon for me as
I
a
don't need
minister
a
or any
recitation
minister.
of your opening statement again, Sergeant Schultz,
Point of
saying
order,
I know
Chair.
nothing. Look, I'll go on to the
Point
next
of order,
question.
Chair.
In 2016,
Sorry,
Point of order,
you
Chair.
appointed
Mr. Perkins,
Andre
I
Lees-Matteau.
do have a point of order. Ms. Khaild, you have the floor.
Maybe it's a point of clarification. I believe that the witness
She's a
here
separate-
today is
you're
Mr. Bains. I'm not sure who Sergeant Schultz or whoever this member is referring to. Absolutely disrespectful.
Agreed, Mr. Perkins. If you could refer to Mr. Bains as the witness or Mr. Bains, it would be appreciated to maintain decorum in the committee. Thank you.
Former Liberal Minister Bains, in charge of the Liberal Green Slush Fund, you appointed Andre Lees-Matteau in 2016 under your new and clean process, correct?
As I indicated in my
That-
opening remarks, my responsibility as a minister is to appoint
to appoint
7 out of the
directors,
15 board members.
And
That's
you
correct.
appointed her. And while she was on the board and while you were minister, $114 million of Green Slush Fund money was voted to her companies. And you had an assistant deputy minister in every single meeting. Do you expect Canadians to believe that you knew nothing?
Sustainable Development Technology Canada is an arm's length organization. The management oversees the day-to-day operations, and there's a board that oversees management.
It's true.
And again,
They also
as I
have
said in my,
the Cycle Capital, Andre Lise-Mateau's company, also had a lobbyist for 10 years. His name was Stephen Guilbeault. It still is Stephen Guilbeault. He lobbied for 10 years. $100 million during those 10 years went to Cycle Capital. He met 25 times with your office and you in the year before he was nominated. Do you remember any of those meetings?
during my tenure as a minister, I met with a number of stakeholders from the clean tech sector. I don't recall any specific meetings with the individuals you have mentioned.
You don't remember meeting with the now radical Liberal Environment Minister who was a nominated
order,
Liberal
Mr. Chair.
candidate? So I
Well,
will ask you once again.
Mr. Perkins, one second.
I'm not sure
Yes,
why
Ms. Lee.
there's name calling going on within our
So-
our committee here.
He's proud of being a radical.
Please. This one I will allow. These are statements we hear in the floor.
Which you guys have established. You guys keep repeating those statements.
Miss-
So I'm not sure
Well, Miss-
why you think that it is okay
Mr.
for
Miss-
us in committee
When you get
to be the chair of the committee, you
repeat
can rule
those
on
Miss
the
and
Khaild.
call them to be credible because they are not credible.
I didn't weigh in on whether they're.
just did,
I
Chair.
said
You
I
just
said
did.
they're echoing what we hear in the House of Commons, which is permitted. Ergo,
I would
they're
appreciate
permitted here.
if the member redacts those comments.
Well, Ms. Khaild, that's not your call, Mr. Perkins.
asking you to do it, Chair.
Pardon me.
I'm asking you
Oh.
to ask the
No,
member to redact those comments because they are absolutely unreasonable.
Miss Khaild,
and
Miss
impolite
Khaild, I have
and
ruled
against
that
our
they are.
democratic institutions.
Ms. Khaild, I have ruled that they are in order. Mr. Perkins has the floor. You have the floor, sir.
So you don't remember meeting with radical Liberal Stephen Guilbeault. Do you remember meeting with a fellow named Gerald Butts in those meetings who was working in the PMO? Since he's listed as meeting with you on this at the same time?
As you know, when I was made minister in 2015, Mr. Butts, the individual you mentioned, worked for the Prime Minister's office.
Did he, those meetings were about funding of Cycle Capital Fund 4. That's what's listed in the public thing, and he met with you. And then EDC, after those meetings, invested in Cycle Capital Fund 4. So that happened fairly quickly. Do you remember having those discussions about having Gerald Butts and the now radical Environment Minister lobbying you to get funds for Cycle Capital, whose founder was on the board that you appointed, from EDC?
As I said before, Sustainable Development Technology Canada is an arm's length organization. And as you mentioned at the beginning, budgets are approved through the parliamentary budget process.
So on October 19th, only 14 days after some of those meetings, EDC announced $145 million for that. So you don't recall any of that, just like you didn't recall anything when you were at Industry Committee. Is that correct?
Could you repeat the question, please?
No, I won't repeat it again. You approved, one of the last things you did as minister was approve, after all of this corruption, you took forward another $750 million for the Green Slush Fund, which was announced a month before you left the job to go work at CIBC and now at the most expensive cell phone company in the world, Rogers. So can you tell me,
Point of order,
with
Mr.
all that
Speaker.
corruption
Point of
going
order,
on,
Mr.
why did you
Speaker.
seek
Just
$750 million of more taxpayer money?
Relevancy, the member
Oh,
who is
come on.
before us is not about here to answer about his future life, but here to answer about SDTC.
Well, if you get the
So-
wax out of your ears, you hear that I asked about
okay,
the
okay,
$750 million approved by cabinet that he took for the
the
Green
same
Slush
point of
Fund.
order,
Mr.
Chair?
Perkins, your actions are just encouraging them to be belligerent to the chair as you're being belligerent to the chair. I would ask you to cease and desist when a point of order is called. Mr. Drouin, the same goes for you, Mr. Drouin. I allow members on both sides latitude to probe. There is no question of relevance here. Mr. Perkins, Mr. Perkins was. Mr. Perkins is, just let me finish. Mr. Perkins is, as all members, are entitled to ask the questions in the manner they please, but his question is clearly, from what I can see, going in the direction of the topic we're studying. Ms. Khaild, do you have a point of order?
Yeah, on the same point of order that was raised by Monsieur Drouin, I don't see how the wax in his ears has anything to do with the questions that are being asked today.
Thank you. Mr. Perkins, you have, I'll back the clock up. You have the question again. Go ahead.
So I'll make it simple for you, Mr. Bains, since that seems to be the only way to try and get an answer. After $114 million went to Andre Lise-Matteau's companies, you went to Cabinet seeking another $750 million for the Green Slush Fund when 25% of the money was going to Cycle Capital, which Stephen Guilbeault owned shares on, was a lobbyist for. Why did you go to Cabinet for another $750 million for such a corrupt organization?
As been discussed before, Sustainable Development Technology Canada is an arm's length organization. The management oversees the day-to-day operations. There's an independent board that oversees them, and the budget process is debated in the House of Commons and approved by the House, and these monies are allocated to promote and support the clean tech sector.
Chair, I think this witness is in contempt of this committee since he refuses to answer a question and keeps repeating his either written PMO
Point of
speaking
order,
points
Chair.
or not. That's all he's doing.
Well, I think we're just
Point of order,
starting,
Chair.
and as skilled parliamentarians, you'll have repeated opportunities to get to Mr. Bains answered. Yes, Ms. Khaild.
Chair, I doubt that the member opposite has the qualifications to make those allegations. I believe that it is up to you to decide whether somebody's in contempt or not, and I personally don't think that anybody has been in contempt so far.
Very much. Mr. Perkins, could you ask your question again, and then we will get an answer and move on.
Very simple. Why did you seek $750 million more for this organization that was funneling money to your Liberal appointments when you knew it was a corrupt organization, and you went forward to give them more money from the taxpayer to further feather bed your political appointees and the Prime Minister's political appointees? Are you really that corrupt?
Budgets are approved by Parliament, and as I said, this is an independent organization that oversees the disbursement of these funds.
Thank you very much. Next up, Mr. Cooper, you have the floor for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Former Liberal Minister Bains, you led the committee to believe that you had no active role in the appointment of Ms. Verscheren beyond receiving a recommendation from the Prime Minister's Department, the PCO, as part of a so-called open, transparent, and merit-based process. You know that that isn't true, just as you knew it wasn't true when you misled committee in June. Isn't that right, former Liberal Minister Bains?
Thank you very much for the question. As I've highlighted before, Ms. Verscheren was appointed by Stephen Harper, Jim Flaherty, Christian
Former Liberal
Parody.
Minister Bains, let's follow the chronology of events leading to Ms. Verscheren's appointment, someone who was in a conflict of interest at the time that you appointed her. On March 15th, 2019...
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Khaild.
Is the former employer of the official opposition's wife out of order in calling
Ms.
Mr.
Khaild,
Bains the
come on.
names that he's calling him?
You in fact are up next, so you will have a 4-minute right to the floor at which you'll be able to take full use of it. Mr. Cooper, you have just over 3 minutes, please.
Former Liberal Minister Bains, let's follow the chronology of events leading to Ms. Verscheren's appointment. In September and October 2018, the PCO received 54 applications for chair of SDTC. On March 15, 2019, they provided you with a short list of 5 recommended candidates. That's the process you keep referencing. You sat on your hands. You ignored the recommendation of PCO. In April 2019, according to Ms. Verscheren, you called her. You asked her to serve as the chair of SDTC. all of a sudden, on April 30th of 2019, 1.5 months after you had a short list of 5 recommended candidates, she applies, and on May 21st, 2019, the PCO adds her name to the short list, and you thereafter appoint her. Do you really expect this committee and Canadians to believe that she was picked as part of a transparent, independent, merit-based process, and that you didn't have your hand involved in picking her? Is that what you want Canadians to believe?
It was an open, transparent, merit-based process, and as I've highlighted,
You
former
knew.
Prime Minister
No, what happened here,
Stephen Harper
what
had
happened,
a-
former Liberal Minister Bains, is that you didn't follow the process. You didn't respect the process. You politically interfered in the process.
As I was trying to state before, Ms. Verschuren was appointed by Stephen Harper to the Canadian North American Competitiveness Council in 2006. Jim
Did the
Flaherty
other
appointed
5
her to the
recommended
Economic.
candidates have conflicts of interest with SDTC? Because Ms. Verschuren had a conflict of interest. What happened about the other 5 candidates?
Again, when we're speaking about Ms. Verschuren, I was highlighting the fact that she was appointed by Christian Parody, the former Minister to Science, Technology,
Mr. Bains,
and
you're not
Innovation
answering my
Council.
question. I asked you, did the other 5 candidates also have conflicts of interest? Because Ms. Verschuren had a conflict of interest at the time you appointed her. $12 million that
Point
her
of order,
company was
Mr. Chair.
receiving from SDTC, and you knew about
Point of
that.
order.
Mr. Cooper, I have a point of
All
order.
public
With all due
office holders.
respect,
Sorry, Mr.
and
Bain, just,
I
yeah.
truly respect Mr. Cooper, but he's asking the witness to opine on some other members that were part of a board. I just don't know what what Mr. Bains can say. We know that the former employer
Duran,
of the leader's wife is asking tough
This is
questions.
not a point
Well, it is a tough
of order.
Well, it would be dismissed. It'd be thrown out of court if it was the real court.
yeah,
But this is a kangaroo court.
as government members are prone to remind this committee, we are not a court. This is a question and answer session, so.
Thank you so much.
I've said that before many times, because it is not a court. We're here to ask questions and receive answers. So, Mr. Cooper, you may proceed.
Mr. Bains, did the other 5 candidates have conflicts of interest as Ms. Verschuren did? Yes or no?
It's important to note that all public office holders must respect and follow the Conflict of Interest Act.
You were advised that Ms. Verschuren had a conflict of interest, and you appointed her anyway. I'm asking you about the other 5 candidates. You refuse to answer, and I take it that they didn't have conflicts of interest, and you appointed someone with a conflict because you don't give a damn about conflicts of interest. Isn't that right, former Liberal Minister Bains?
During my tenure, I made over 100 governor and council recommendations, and it's important that all those individuals that were recommended and ultimately appointed follow the Conflict of
You
Interest
knew she
Act.
had a conflict of interest.
that
You
that
didn't
is
give
the
a
time,
damn,
Mr.
and as a
Cooper.
result,
Miss-
400 million taxpayer dollars
Mr.
have gone out the door
Mr. Cooper, I will just
following
remind you that
conflict-ridden appointment.
Mr. Cooper, I will remind you, as I was reminded today in the House, that we will use parliamentary language in this committee room. Yes,
Chair,
Ms. Kelly.
I literally heard Mr. Brock threaten Mr. Drouin, and I don't appreciate that.
I did not hear that.
Point of order, Chair.
Mr. The chair will sustain your point before you make it, Mr. Brock. I did not hear that. It was Mr.
With those terms
Mr.
is
Durant, you have the
definitely
floor,
a
please.
threat.
Listen to what he had
Look
to
at how
say.
you're
Mr.
pointing
Brock.
at him.
Thank you,
Poor
Mr.
guy.
Okay.
Look at how you're pointing at
Listen
him.
to what he had to say.
Why are you doing this?
I will suspend for 2 minutes, which just
Why?
means the time's going to get added to the clock. We shall return in 2 minutes.
So, Mr. Bains, what is your relationship with Amber Batul?
Merci.
Thank you very much for your question.
I worked with Ms. Batul when I was at CIBC.
Vous ne connaissez pas
You didn't know Ms. Batul when she was chief of staff of SDTC?
Désolé.
I'm sorry.
Please, sorry, I didn't hear.
Vous ne connaissiez pas Madame
You didn't know Ms. Batul when she worked at SDTC?
I think I met her maybe once or twice at an event.
Donc, Madame Batoul,
So Ms. Batul was the chief of staff of SDTC, and you hadn't spoken to her more than once or twice at the time. Yet Ms. Batul followed you to CIBC. She obtained a position just after you at CIBC. Point of order, Mr. Chair. Once again, they're suspecting that this was a decision made at CIBC. This has nothing to do with SDTC. Can we stick to SDTC? Mr. Drouin, we let you talk about anything when it was your turn. We heard about Mr. Perkins and I don't know what else, but so now Mr. Bains knows very well how to speak. He can answer the questions asked by Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés that she's asking very respectfully.
Madame
So, Madame Sinclair Desgagnés, you have the floor. I think some people are afraid of the answers Mr. Bains could give. So, I'll start again. Ms. Batul followed you to CIBC. Once again, Mr. Chair, I'm going to make a point of order. This has no relation to the decision. If Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés suspects that Mr. Bains made the decision to hire this woman, she needs evidence.
You're on beyond less than thin ice because we just listened to you. The chair allowed you to go on for 6 minutes about yes, and I stopped the clock every time that happened to give you your time. But now for you to jump in and say that another member who's trying to ask questions to the witness can't be allowed to do so. I'm not sure who you think you are.
I don't, Mr. Chair. I think about relevancy of this, like, why are we here? We are here to study SDTC, not CIBC, not Rogers, not anything else. SDTC.
And the members' questions are
Point of
going
order, Chair.
exactly in that direction. Yes, Ms. Khaild.
Point of order, Chair. I take exception to you questioning who Mr. Drouin thinks he is. He is a member of Parliament with the exact same privileges that we all have in this committee, and I don't think exactly. We have the privileges that we have within this committee, and I don't think that is something that you should be calling out.
That is correct, and Mr. Drouin was given an opportunity to speak. Now, Madame Sinclair Desgagnés, it's not up to Mr. Drouin to suddenly decide that what another member is asking is relevant or not.
Why do we have point of orders, Mr. Chair?
Well, again, I ruled on it, and now I'm moving on. Mr. Perkins, you had a point of order as well.
My point of order is about Mr. Drouin. From the moment I asked my first question within the first minute, he was interrupting. He chose as a tactic to try and disrupt every single sentence I said. Now he's doing it to the block member. It's a specific tactic to disrupt the committee. And because of his disruptive behavior, I would ask you consider that you not allow him to speak or remove him from the committee.
I would ask the same favor for Mr. Perkins who interrupted me.
Gentlemen, let's try to proceed with this. I would ask that Madame Sinclair Desgagnés be allowed to continue her questioning.
I was interrupted a number of times. So you can ask your question again. And once you've concluded, I'll begin at 5 minutes. Wait, there's another point of order.
Chair, I think it's only fair that Madame Sinclair Desgagnés gets her full 6 minutes at this point.
Well, Ms. Khaild is certainly going to, Madame Sinclair va certainement
Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés will certainly have her 6 minutes, so you can ask your question again.
But the interruption is happening because of the numerous points of order, which are, as I said, a little thin about relevance, when I'm going to allow members, and always have, a lot of latitude. Vas-y, Madame Sinclair Desgagnés.
je remercie.
I'd like to thank my colleague opposite, and especially Mr. Drouin, for his mansplaining on the topic of study. Let's continue. Ms. Batul followed you to CIBC, And I received as information that you had a number of meetings with her while she was chief of staff at SDTC. You say it's not the case, that you maybe met her once or twice, but that's contrary to the information I've received.
Confirmer avec vous.
I'd like to confirm with you.
As I've said before, I may have met her a few times. I don't recall the specific number of times. Again, SDTC is an arm's length organization where the management oversees the day-to-day operation.
Merci. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you. When you say a number of times, is this once or twice, or is it more like 10 or 15? To give an idea.
Again, I can't put a specific number on it. It was over 6 years ago. I dealt with a number of people during my tenure as a minister. And so as a minister,
D'accord.
my,
Merci.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Have you participated?
Merci. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Bains. Did you participate in her hiring at CIBC?
again,
vous ne la
I'm here to
connaissiez pas.
talk about
If you didn't know her.
Development Technology Canada and any questions you have pertaining to that.
Mes questions, c'est mon temps.
My questions, it's my time. I can ask you questions about the fact that you may have been a part of the hiring process for Ms. Batul. And if you didn't know her or hardly knew her, why did you participate? Did you push for her hiring at CIBC?
Vous allez voir où je vais en venir.
You'll see where I'm going. It has a relation with SDTC, so please answer.
Yeah, as I said, I'm more than pleased to answer any questions pertaining to Sustainable Development Technology Canada.
Monsieur le Président, j'arrive.
Mr. Chair, I'm getting to SDTC. I'm asking questions that are related to SDTC.
S'il vous plaît,
Please ask your question again.
Donc pour la
So for the third time, I ask if you participated in the hiring process, the recruitment process for Ms. Batul at CIBC following your meetings with her as Chief of Staff of SDTC.
So as I've mentioned, I met with Ms. Batul when I was a minister. I don't recall the number of times specifically. And as I've also highlighted, Sustainable Development Technology Canada.
Merci. Donc,
Thank you.
donc vous pouvez pas.
So you can't say that the fact that you met her beforehand when she was Chief of Staff at SDTC influenced your decision to bring her to CIBC afterward. You deny that it was related. Your work with her, your meetings with her when she was at SDTC have nothing to do with the fact that she went and worked with you at CIBC.
As I've mentioned before, the management oversees the day-to-day operations at Sustainable Development Technology Canada, which is an arm's length organization.
Merci.
And my
Mais vous,
sole
Thank you, but you're not answering the question. It's a pretty simple question. Did your meetings with Ms. Batul when she was Chief of Staff at SDTC have an impact on your recruitment of Ms. Batul at CIBC? This is a question you can answer with yes or no, please, Mr. Bains.
It's an arm's length organization that oversees SDTC, and my responsibility as a minister was to appoint 7 of the 15 board members.
voyons. Je pense que je ne.
I don't think I'll obtain an answer from you on this, so I'll move to the next topic. A question that came up earlier. Who encouraged you to hire or name Ms. Verschuren? Was it someone internal to the department?
With respects to the individual, Ms. Verschuren, as you know, she had an impeccable track record. She was appointed by Stephen Harper
Ouais,
in
j'ai demandé qui.
2006.
I asked who. Who? Was it, for example, Andrew Noseworthy who encouraged you to hire her? Mr. Noseworthy, did he have anything to do with that process?
There was a new process established in 2016 that was open to all Canadians, and
D'accord,
it's an
point of order,
open.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Khaild.
Even though I'm sitting quite far away from my conservative colleagues, I heard one of them call Mr. Bains a liar, which I think is not only disrespectful, but also goes against our standing orders.
On the same point of order.
Yes, Mr. Brock.
I'm sitting with my conservative colleagues. I heard no such thing. But more importantly, I laugh at many
You
things.
laughed at it.
I laugh at many things. I didn't laugh at that because I didn't
You
hear
laughed
it.
at it.
Chair, on that same point of order, I'm actually getting quite frustrated. I'm sure other members are getting frustrated at the obvious attempts of this particular witness, a former minister of the Crown, who is deliberately wasting time, not answering a direct question that's put to him, repeating the same talking lines over and over again.
Thank you.
From the
Miss-
same
okay,
testimony
Mr.
that
Brock,
he gave
I-
at Industry on June the 5th, 2004.
Chair?
I
I'm
presume-
asking the chair to interject and get this witness to answer the question.
Point of order, Chair.
Just one, I've got a couple lined up here. Mr. Cooper, I think did you have a point of order you want to make? No, okay, Ms.
I
Ms.
would
Kelly?
appreciate if Mr. Cooper would apologize to Mr. Bains for calling him a liar. We all know that when witnesses come to this committee, they are under obligation to be truthful, and I know for a fact that Mr. Bains, through his, not just his ministry, but also through the work he's done throughout his entire life, he's been a truthful and principled person. And I take personal
okay.
exception.
Thank you.
I take personal exception. I take personal exception not only to members in the Conservatives laughing right now, but also to somebody who is an innocent person being maligned by the Conservatives,
all right.
and this is their go-to, their motto.
Why don't I hear from
of-
Mr. Cooper
of-
now?
Of hearing time and time again. This is absolutely unreasonable, Chair.
Thank you.
Well, on the same point of order, perhaps Mr. Bains can apologize to taxpayers
Okay.
for $400 million.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, thank you.
That's
Okay,
absolutely
okay.
Point
of order,
Ladies
Mr.
and
Chair.
gentlemen,
Retract those comments.
Okay.